petrol stations here in the UK have been emptied across the country, with some reporting a 500% increase in demand. For example, BP, which has stations across the whole country, said that 400 of theirs were totally out of fuel. That's around a third of all their petrol stations across the country. And yesterday alone, the RAC, a leading rescue service, said that they attended twice as many drivers in a single day who'd broken down because they'd run out of fuel than they would have usually seen in a whole week. And things are starting to get a bit better. And yesterday, demand was around 20% above average, which is down from the 50% excess demand we saw over the weekend. But that petrol shortage has been attributed not to an actual lack of fuel by the transport minister, but to a shortage of truck drivers available to deliver that fuel to petrol stations. And a leak about that driver shortage is thought to have triggered this whole rush from consumers to fill up when they'd heard that there may be some petrol stations running out. This, of course, has had a knock-on effect, and that's meant that now there have been very few petrol stations around the country which haven't had queues for petrol. Many are pointing to a lack of facilities for drivers, making the job an unattractive one, and there are reports of lacks of showers and facilities in truck stops. So it's not necessarily a job that many people want to do. It's a tough job, and there are people who just simply don't want to do it. So this potential problem could have an effect not just in fuel, but in other areas where truck drivers are essential. So some say that better conditions for truck drivers could make the job more attractive to people and help the supply chain of all sorts of goods in the future. Now, the government's been keen not to react too strongly to this crisis because they're afraid that the more emergency measures they put in place, the more likely people are to react by rushing out to fill up and buy petrol when they don't actually have an immediate need for fuel. And that's what they claim caused the shortage in the first place. But while that is their position, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has said that the crisis is stabilising and he hopes that he won't need to call in the army, but just in case, they are on standby in case things don't return to normal. And that means that up to 150 military tanker drivers are on standby. They are apparently familiarising themselves with fuel distribution techniques so that they can deliver to the petrol stations in case they need to be deployed. And that increase in demand has caused supplies to dwindle. And there's less petrol available and more people are therefore rushing out to fill up their vehicles, increasing the demand further. It's a bit of a vicious cycle. But now many people have more fuel in their tank, the government say, than they usually would. The demand is indeed decreasing because there's only so much petrol you can panic buy unless you're starting to fill up jerry cans, though some people have been doing that too. The impact on consumers has been massively disruptive, but the bigger concern has been the effect on workers and essential services, with teachers and medical staff calling for priority service in petrol stations, and some stations and councils deciding that that was important because those people obviously need the fuel in their cars quicker and to be able to get to work to keep society going. But increased measures like that put in place by the government will, of course, increase panic buying.